Hello, my name is Roy Poyan, and I'm the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. I want to thank you for joining us for Fentanyl and Families in Harm's Way. Today's episode, we're going to take a look at the community and the family and the 4 structures that are present for the community to take advantage of as they journey in their life with substance use disorders as part of the family dynamic. What we want to do is we want to break down what is a very complex resource, the community. The good news is that this has been an industry that's developed over time, and there's a lot of segments there that are specific to the needs that we kind of know you might want to take advantage of in assisting you. And what we mean by that is there's 4 primary structures, and let's just take a minute and identify what they are, because we believe it'll be helpful. The first is your family is one of those structures, one of those 4. You have a process, you have a way of doing things, you have the way of assisting each other. You're taking these episodes, so it's evident that you're interested in building your awareness and strengthening your skills so that you can perform better within the dynamic of the family. So you are one of the structures of our society as it relates to what's available to you. In a sense, you're available to you, and you're even more available when you know more about what's taking place and how to take advantage of assets that are in your community. Now, the second one is your faith community. Whether you go to church or not, your faith community is there. Whether you use the mental health departments, that mental health department is there. Whether you use other elements of medical and psychology and different things that are available in your community, they are there. Faith is one of them. We strongly encourage you that if you are inclined to use your faith, that you really do put it forward in a very obvious practice, daily if possible, so that you can strengthen yourself from a spiritual standpoint of what you're dealing with. Then the third area are community agencies. There's a plethora of community agencies out there that are sitting waiting for you to call them, because they can't call you, they don't know who you are. And so this is part of that. You have to break through the stigma of what is addiction and the family and reach out and touch these different entities so that they can provide you with assistance. The good news is you're taking these episodes, so you're going to be better prepared and stronger in order to reach out to the right level, the right group, and reasonably asking them what they offer, and you have an expectation, because in advance you learned about it by taking these episodes, of what you're asking for and what you should expect. And then the fourth area is the healthcare system. Boy, my head spins when I think about the healthcare system. It is so complex. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to exhaust yourself being told, we don't do that, or you should go over here. Every time you hit a wall because you didn't know that they were going to ask you for this kind of paperwork in advance, and had you known, you could have brought it with you, or you could have scanned it and put it in a PDF ahead of time and had it ready just to shoot over to them. So there's a lot about the healthcare system. And then when you start to consider that the healthcare system consists of an addiction, detox, recovery, residential, IOP, aftercare. I mean, there's just in that one category. Then you look at mental health and dual diagnosis to the addiction, where they may be experiencing schizophrenia, severe depression, anxiety, multiple personalities or general personality disorders that need to be diagnosed, and a plan of care needs to be designed for them. So there's that part of the healthcare industry. Then you're talking about other types of services like medical, and those are referred to as comorbidities. So you have addiction, you have mental health, which is referred to as dual diagnoses, they're dual to the addiction, and then you have comorbidities, co meaning with. And so it may be that the person has a heroin addiction and is suffering severe depression, and because of the longevity of the heroin use, has a heart valve medical problem. Well, that's 3 diagnoses right there. That means there's 3 stages. What stage is this disease in, or is this condition in? Mild, moderate, or severe? And then there's a plan of treatment for each of these. And you start to think, oh my gosh, we're still just in healthcare, and that's what we have to deal with. Well, you do, and you will. I mean, either way, you're going to go through this. How well you go through it depends on how much you know and can help to support the process. And the good news is, by taking these episodes and then looking and taking ownership of what you've learned and taking it further, then you will be much better off as you start to approach these. So as we start to look at the 4 structures in our community, and we start to consider what is it that we're dealing with? Well, to be perfectly honest with you, we're dealing with a process. It's like, well, gee, Roy, that sounds kind of like a business term, or IT. Well, it kind of is. It's kind of an if, then, go to. If it's this, then go to that, and then expect to do this. And that means determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action is on our part before we go out. So you need to be doing these things ahead of time. And that's what we're going to show you. In each issue, we will determine a solution, develop a decision, design a plan of action. So you can go out and use the structure that's available to you and assist and gain assistance in what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So let's take a closer look at this. Why don't you join us at the family table, and let's sit down and find out how your family is aligned with these 4 structures and what you can do to better prepare yourself and to identify what it is you might need given certain issues, and then how to, as a process, include them.
Thank you for joining us here at the family table. There's a lot for us to go over, so sit down, let's open up our books and get ready, because we're going to take a look at your environment in a different way. And guess what? This industry, although it is an industry that provides medical, mental health, and addiction services, is not an industry that has itself coordinated for you and your needs. And what I mean by that is, this industry does not necessarily talk to this industry, which does not necessarily effectively talk to this industry. I'm sure that's not a surprise, but we have to be very aware of how, when we move through these different resources, how effective they are to communicate what it is that we are and what we need is going to play out in what type of level of service we actually receive. The quality and the consistency, unfortunately, is kind of up to us. And it's ironic because we're the least informed about what's going on. That's the system, okay? And we just have to accept that. But to understand it means that we could do something for ourselves that makes it an advantage. You know what we're talking about here? We're talking about the family needs to become a consumer. You are now a consumer. If you were to go out and buy tires and you wanted Michelin tires, and the person that you went to had Goodyear and Cooper and other tires, but they didn't have Michelin, you might sit there and say, well, then maybe because I'm at this store, I'll just select Cooper or Goodrich or Firestone. And the answer to that is, but it was Michelin that was going to be the best for you, given your style of driving and the type of car and the terrain. All right, let's get back to healthcare. The fact is, it's the same. If you show up to a treatment center and you need residential and they do not provide detox, they only provide an intensive outpatient program, then that's not going to be the right treatment center for you. But because you're educated and you took the seminar, which is forthcoming in our series, you would know what type ahead of time. That knowledge is empowering. We want to take the same steps here when it comes to taking a look at the community and what it has for us. So let's get out our study guide and let's turn to the section that says the 4 primary family support structure. What we're going to do is we're going to identify that there are 4 primary structures in our society that will be of interest for you to specifically say, we're going to this part of our community and we're going to get help. And we know what we're asking for and we know what to expect. So the first is the family. Oddly enough, the family is your strongest and your best and your primary support structure. Maybe that's not so odd, but it might seem that odd because right now it may be that you're looking at your family and thinking, gee, we're all over the map on how we're working with this addiction topic in our family. We're fighting and we can't seem to come to a consensus on an agreed upon way of doing this one thing, and we need help. Okay, well, that being a family that needs help, there's nothing new about that, and hopefully that's something that has brought you here today in order to view these episodes. But the fact is, we can make changes by giving you knowledge, and then you going out and seeking the right level of service to help support your decision. So the family being a primary structure is one. The local community organizations, meaning the you might have jobs and family services, you might have a utilities a benefit package that helps you pay for some of the utilities. You might have sober living. Of course, you have the treatment industry, the medical industry, and the mental health industry. There are a sundry of other peer-to-peer services that are in your community that provide you with a certain level of service that you have made a decision through your processes of the 3D coping skills that is a part of your plan to help them, let them help you. The other is your faith organizations. So they're the third of, now these aren't in priority, they're the third of the possible structures in your community. If you're not involved in a faith organization, now's a good time to think about that. And it's not disruptive because when you come into them, even if you are currently involved in them, you'll start to use them for a different reason. And they're there for that. Faith organizations, they know family. They're about family. And they're also about you and your individual faith practice. So the faith community is a great place for you to start to anchor time and use services that they provide. And then there's the healthcare system. Oh, the healthcare system, my gosh, how many different directions we can go when we start to talk about the healthcare system. I mean, you just go down to the parking lot and you see an emergency room, you see an inpatient, you see neurology, you see cardiac, you see endocrinology, pulmonary. Guess what? All of those are part of your body. It's a part of Jerry's body, the person who's misusing substances, and the fact that he's misusing substances, we can almost be assured, has impacted their medical. It's also impacted their mental. And we already know that in an addiction sense, it's impacted those things that create a brain disease around substance use disorders. So you're sitting in the parking lot of the healthcare system saying, wow, this is a lot. Which one of these groups do I need? Well, we're going to talk about getting an assessment in an upcoming episode, and that will help you to understand, diagnostic and then plan of care. The assessment is something that you often get when you go to one of these structured support elements. It's one of the things that you don't know necessarily what you need. They do, but they need to meet you first. So you have to kind of come out of the family, which is one of the most difficult things we find in this whole occurrence of how does a family respond to the drug epidemic when the drug epidemic is part of their family system. Well, not all, but many families retract. And they don't necessarily say, this is a disease, and we need to go out and learn more about the disease. At the same time, we need to learn about how well we're handling the fact that this is a disease in our family, and we need to go out and find services that'll help us to deal with this disease. That go out and help often is kind of episodic. We have a certain need and we sit there and we've got this membrane over our family and it's kind of like a globe, like you saw in like space models for societies on the moon. And we reach out, we touch the membrane and we say, I need this, and then we retract. I need this, and then we retract. The community doesn't sit there and share, hey, this is a family in trouble, and we need to combine everything in order to help them. That is not the way we're set up. Could be, but it's not the way we're set up. So with that in mind, the family really needs to understand itself, its situation. However, part of that understanding could very easily be they have to go out, touch the service, and say to the service, assess us on this topic and help us to understand where we are and what's taking place in our environment so that we can properly look for the types of services and needs that'll help us the best. So let's take a look at these 4 different types of categories by breaking down what do we mean when the family is the primary. Well, the family in preparing is part of that. The family in taking an inventory of itself and its community and services is a part of that. The family having a plan of action is a part of that. That's the family support structure, meaning it sets itself up for success purposefully. And that's what we're giving you in the 3D coping skills. Then the faith organizations, they understand faith and faith practice. You can't expect them to understand addiction and the behavioral models that we're talking about for family therapy. That's not their world. So when you reach out to that specific entity, then you want to make sure that they provide for you the services that they're set up to provide you. And that's why you're talking with them. Yes, you want them to do an assessment of your spiritual faith practices and to help you to be better at using those faith practices, just in the same way that you would for other types of services and care. And then we'll do that with the healthcare system, and we'll do that with the community. So we've got these 4 categories as structures in our community, and we're going to each of them, and we're asking them to assess us in what we believe is our need, and then help us to get to the right level. And we're the final decision maker. It's not their responsibility to do this for us. We have to ask them. It's very important that we know what we're asking for and what we can expect. The 3D coping skills helps us to do that. So let's take a look at our workbook, and we can kind of outline where would we put all this information should it become a need to use it. So in our workbook, under the section 4 primary support structures, we would then provide this as a model for what we're seeking to do. So we actually delineate, when you go to the city, here's what you want to do. Here's what you want to look for. This is a great tool for you. Take the time to go through the practical exercise and write in the boxes or create your own model on your computer and make an inventory of exactly what it is that you're looking. Do you see how the workbook gets you to, through the exercise, do it in a more structured, deliberate way? That's the value that this provides for you, so that you can make sure that you've covered all the high points. For example, when you take an inventory, you're going to put in the point of contact and their name. You're going to put in their phone number. You're going to put in their email address. You're going to put in their website. And that's for medical, mental, addiction, legal, financial, employers, foster care, elder care, housing needs, transportation, all of these categories. And you can add to the categories as you choose. But what you're doing is you're getting yourself organized. And that's when a family becomes empowered. Okay, now, once again, using the 3D coping skills is a real advantage because you're going to determine a solution on, let's say you're looking at, you're going to have Jerry go to a treatment center. Part of it's going to come out of your you're going to pay out of pocket for. And with that in mind, you need to look at your financials because it's a considerable amount of money. And you're thinking, well, we'd like to send them out of state, or we're using an in-state program, and you're looking at your finances and you're saying, well, we know from these episodes, that relapses can happen many times. So we may be back revisiting our financials at this time. And we have an episode for just this topic. But it brings into account that you're basically looking at a structure and determining, in this case, services. You're determining what you can afford. And for that reason, you want to do a comparison. And then you want to seek advice. So determining a solution might be, let's talk to a financial advisor. Because if we start to look at, taking money out of our home equity or cashing in a certain, like 401k or retirement portion, how much would we have to survive going forward? In this sense, you're approaching it very systematically and logically because you're using the 3D coping skills and you're determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. But in the end, what you'll end up doing is, and in all cases you'll end up doing is, you're going to go out and you're going to find the proper resource that will provide you with that. So what we want to do there is we want to go out and find these people inside these 4 structures and write down who they are and then make a task list of what do we need to do in order to bring them into our family as we start to exercise our plan of action. I believe that this is going to be a great value for you in knowing that there are 4 different types of structures. I think that when you look at your whole journey, it's enormously taxing and it's just overwhelming. So what we're doing here is we're saying, it's okay. We're just, you're not going to step back in the sense of you're not going to step out of it because you can't, but you're going to step away from it in order to be able to see all of it and say, okay, we got 4 different sections here of structures that we can draw from once we understand what it is that we need and we've determined a solution and developed a decision and designed a plan of action. We're now going to go into possibly each of these on the single issue, or for this one issue, it will be resolved with just going to this one category of support structure. I want to thank you for taking the time to view this episode, and we hope you find it to be of value. Hello, I want to thank you for continuing to view our episode. And we're now going to work into the area of the 3Ds. This is an important characteristic for the family to develop skills in. And we'll start by taking the time to look at an issue and then determine the issues based on the area of determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. By using your Module 3 workbook and going to a specific issue, you'll be able to find that the first step in that 3D skill set is the FTR, the Family Transformational Model. And the Family Transformational Model is a set-up way, each time the same way, that we will take 5 categories to look at in determining a solution. And each category is going to have 3 questions. So let's get started. The first is to define the issue. Naturally, we'll want to know what the issue is. The word issue is really problem, but we're saying the word issue is, the reason we're saying the word issue is it's just a little bit easier to digest, because it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's just something that's happening and we need to determine a solution to it. The next question is, how does the issue impact the family? We need to know that. We need to know we have an issue, that's fine. The issues can exist, but if it's impacting the family, in what way is it impacting the family? And then what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? That's very important for us to know. The fact is that this issue exists and it's impacting the family. We tend to believe maybe there was something we could have done to kind of get ready for it. And if there was, then we would want to have taken those steps, which is what all these episodes are about. And then who can help assist us and the family in our response? So we want to start to ask ourselves, we know that there's an issue, we know that it's impacting the family, and there are things that we could do to prepare for this, but we're probably going to need a resource, information, another person outside of our family, or maybe one of our family members specifically can use their functionality and contribute. So we want to identify that. And then what should the family expect as their outcome? And kind of a start with the end in mind thought, where we're saying, if we're going to do something, it's going to result in something. So is that result desirable? Is that really what we want? Because if we're going to create a solution, then we want the solution's outcome to be what we expect it would be. So in each of these categories that I just described, 1 through 5, there are 3 questions, and we're going to ask ourselves each of these. Let's go back into the first category, define the issue. Clearly state what happened or what will happen. We want to know very clearly what happened or what's likely to happen. And then write that down. Identify who's involved or who should be involved, and then what would you like to have happen or like to see happen. The third question in every category is going to be used. You'll see how in just a minute. But just remember, the third question in every category, so this question right here, the way you answer it, will be reused. Now the next question is, how is the issue impacting the family? Who in the family exactly is impacted? In what way are they impacted? And then the third question is, what is needed to move forward? And then the third category is, what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? The 3 questions again. What needs to be done? And then prioritize that list. Who needs to be involved? And then what will it look like? The third question. What will it look like when completed? Then the 4th category is, who can help and assist the family in their response? The 3 questions are, how to search and organize this organization to help you. In other words, it's not enough that you know you're going to go and introduce yourselves to a treatment center in your community. You want to start to determine, how do I look for them and organize my way of seeking help, because it might not just be that group alone. You may also need other services to kind of start to create a who can assist us. And it may be many different types of people. What to ask from them, and then what to expect. Remember the third question, what to expect. And then the 5th category is, what should the family expect as their outcome? Well, that has to do a lot with timing. And if it takes a certain amount of time, let's be realistic of what that is. That has something to do with the expense of the involvement, of getting involved in this issue. And then the third question being, required changes, our changes as family members, for this response to successfully take place. Now, let's state what our solution is. Hey, this is the great news. You've already developed your solution. By answering each of these 3 questions, the third question in every category, you'll pull forward now into your statement. So your first sentence of your statement is the third answer in the first category. What would you like to have happen or like to see happen? Well, that becomes your first sentence. So what your first sentence for your solution statement is, what we would like to see happen is, and you just pull your answer from there to here. Do the same thing with the second category. How does the issue impact the family? Using the third question's answer, what is needed for the family to move forward? So now your second sentence is, what's needed to move forward is, and now you're accumulating these answers from these categories, the third question, and it's actually becoming your first sentence, your second sentence, your third sentence, your fourth sentence, and your fifth sentence in your solution statement. So your solution statement is going to sound something like, what we would like to see happen is, and what's needed to move forward will be, and then the third question from the third category, what it will look like when completed will be, and then what we expect will be, and then what's required for us to have a successful response is. Now those are your 5 sentences. You've just constructed your solution. And this is how you go about using a model for creating a solution. For any issue in life you have to face, you can use this as a way of approaching it. Now let's go to the other area, which is the second coping skill, making a decision. Let's make a value-based decision. Let's make a decision each time that kind of balances with what we value most. So first we want to determine what are our values. Well, the best way to do that is to write down on a piece of paper, what types of things do you as an individual value most? And each member of your family can do this in a kind of a group exercise. And then once you've done that, I value love, I value honesty, I value relationships and sharing. These could all be an individual's 1, 2, 3. Then prioritize them. Which of the 1, 2, 3 is most important? Then have each member of the family do the same thing. And then you can sit there and say to the family, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? And then what was your 2? What was your 2? What was your 3? What was your 3? And where you start to see many people in the family say, well, my number 1 is relationships, my number 2 was trust, and my number 3 was love. Well, then you talk to another person, they say, well, my number 1 was love, my number 2 was personal expression or confidentiality, or so they mentioned something different, but they did mention love. And then the third member of the family happens to mention love also. You know now that love is a value of the family. So whatever decisions you make, you want to balance it on the fact of, does this disrupt our values? If it does, at least you know that it does, and to what degree. You're calculating that. But at least also you're including, what do we value most? Let's make sure our decisions don't counter that. And now, in the first step, we're going to identify exactly what's happened. And this is, by the way, in your book, okay? And it is for each of the episodes. Now, identify exactly what's happened, what happened, how did it happen, who did it happen to. Then the second step is analyze the situation, assess the problem, identify the problem, and in what areas did the problem create an impact. You're writing all of these down. The third step of that the third step in the decision-making model is, what is the number of one contributing factor? What is causing this issue to take place? You need to know that before you make a decision. The fourth step is, now that you know the number one factor, you need to go out and find out what information there is about this. Your primary source, you're going to go to the actual person or organization that's involved with this and ask them, what is this issue, and help us to understand it better. The secondary source would be, somebody's telling you this happened, or somebody suggests that you should do something a certain way, and it's coming from somebody else other than the primary source. It could be an article, a clinical paper. These are all secondary sources, and you gather them and you make them part of your primary secondary information gathering. The third area that you look at is your gut. What does your gut, because that's often where our faith comes in, and other things that are very important when making decisions get included. So trust your gut is what we're saying in the decision-making process. The fifth step in making a good quality decision is where you're taking a criteria and saying, let's take what we're going to make a decision about and let's balance it on the criteria to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And this will ensure safety of your loved one. Is safety a part of what's being considered? And do we have the resources that are needed to do the decision we're looking at? And then do we understand the timetable? Is it realistic? And do we understand the negative impacts? Because every decision has a positive and negative. Well, identify what the negative outcomes might be so that you can weight the factor of, is this a good decision? And then would you do this would you ask others to do this if they were doing it for you? Meaning it was done for you or to you. Is this still a good decision? These are all areas that you want to take a look at. The third coping skill is in the area of the family plan of action. And everybody could say, well, Roy, listen, we're just going to go out and do it. Well, it's going to get done a lot more effectively. I want to warn you that the addiction industry is not organized. And then again, either is the family. So you're taking two disorganized organizations and you're putting them together. So a plan is a very good idea. The other factor is you're going to more than likely require the assistance of a lot of different groups. And as time goes by, those groups are going to change. And now it's a whole new set of groups that you're dealing with. When you're at the hospital, the ER, that's what that is. Then you move over to detox, that's what that is. Then you move over to therapy and treatment, and that lasts for 16 weeks. That's what that is. Then you're looking at sober living, recovery, maybe incarceration, and then reentry. On all that's involved in that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a plan put on paper based on the decision and the information gathering that you've made based on the solution that you know you want to use are very good ideas. It all comes together with the plan of action. Then you take the plan of action and you go find a professional to help you. Everything that we've done up to now is to position you to a place where you can be properly assisted and directed and supported. This is what's often missing in the families. This is what exhausts the families. This is where the families get into fights internally on. So, for that reason, we're going to apply the 3D coping skills. Determine a solution. We're going to develop a decision, and we're going to design a plan of action. And we're going to do it each time. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm confident it will be.